Welcome to the deep dive. Now, if you asked most people, what a written constitution is, they'd probably mention things like philosophy, the birth of democracy, noble fights for rights.
Sure, the French Revolution, the American Founding Fathers, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But the source material we're looking at today, it completely flips that script.
It really does. We're aiming to distill a pretty surprising core argument. That the written constitution, this global political technology, wasn't primarily born from philosophical debates.
Okay.
It was forged, really, in the crucible of accelerating global warfare.
Warfare.
Okay.
And we have this incredible scene to kick things off, right?
Yeah, it's striking. Picture this. 1908, Istanbul. A Chinese reformer, Kang Yue, he's in exile, and he witnesses the Young Turk Rebellion.
And these rebels, they weren't just, staging a coup. Their explicit demand, the thing they were shouting about, was restoring the old 1876 Ottoman constitution.
Which had been dormant for ages. And the reason they gave the Sultan, they basically said, look, every country has a constitution. And crucially, the ideas of the soldiers had changed.
Wow. So by the early 20th century, it was already seen as like a basic requirement?
Pretty much. A non-negotiable tool for modern state power, for military legitimacy.
Yeah.
It wasn't just an optional extra.
So, okay, if we push past the political theory for a minute, what are these sources really arguing these documents are? Are they not about rights then?
Well, yes and no. The argument is that primarily they emerged as tools. Tools for survival, for military mobilization, for legitimacy. And this was all driven by a new kind of conflict emerging globally after about 1750.
What the sources call hybrid warfare.
Exactly. Expensive global hybrid warfare, combining massive armies and powerful navies.
Right. Let's unpack that term, hybrid warfare. It sounds quite modern, but you're saying this older 18th century version was the real engine for this political change. What was different about war back then?
It just exploded in scale and, crucially, cost. Conflicts spread across continents, demanding unbelievable resources to fund both huge land armies and these massive navies at the same time.
That dual capability.
Yes. And that logistical demand, it just bled states dry financially.
You can see the price tag almost immediately with the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 63. I mean, that conflict was brutal.
Absolutely devastating. Look at Prussia, a relatively small state. Population would be 4.5 million. They lost 500,000 people, troops and civilians.
500,000.
And for Britain, just to maintain that hybrid military, the Army-Navy combo, their army size had to jump from about 62,000 men per year in the previous war to 93,000 men annually during the 7 Years' War. Think of the cost year after year. A staggering expense.
And this wasn't just a European problem, right? This pressure was global.
It's definitely not contained. Take the Indian ruler, Hyder Ali of Mysore. Incredibly successful on land. I mean, he forced the British East India Company, a powerhouse, to sue for peace in the late 1760s.
Very formidable.
Very. But even he recognized the limits against this new kind of threat, the one backed by sea power. He famously admitted he couldn't swallow the sea.
Swallow the sea. That's such a powerful image. It just perfectly captures that feeling of vulnerability to this new, overwhelming hybrid force.
Right. You could dominate the land, but the sea brought this whole other dimension of threat and expense.
So how did this massive military pressure translate into political action, even in places you might think were, kind of isolated?
It forced political innovation just for survival. States, or even groups trying to become states, had to figure out ways to build internal cohesion, basically, for defense.
Like Corsica.
Exactly. Corsica, 1755. Tiny island, right in the middle of the early stages of the 7 Years' War. The rebel leader, Pasquale Paoli, he drafts a constitution.
And there's that amazing detail from the source. He didn't even have paper. He was using a razor to scrape the ink off old letters to create blank sheets.
Yeah, just think about the urgency, the desperation.
Yeah.
This wasn't some leisurely philosophical project in a quiet study.
No, this was survival mode.
It was literally a scramble for legitimacy, for a way to organize. And Paoli's stated reason, explicitly defense. He argued every Corsican must have some political rights because, and this is the key bit, otherwise, what interest would he take in defending the country?
So the Constitution itself becomes a tool for recruitment, for mobilization, giving people a stake worth fighting for.
Precisely. An immediate military strategy baked into the political structure.
Okay, so if rebels and insurgents needed these written documents to organize and fight, what about the established powers? The monarchs facing the exact same pressures from these incredibly expensive wars, did they adopt this technology too?
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just a revolutionary's tool. Monarchs feeling the heat from these military pressures, saw the potential. They started using constitutional drafting as a top-down strategy.
For control.
Modernization.
Both. And for consolidating resources, shoring up the state against foreign threats, basically trying to manage the chaos. We see that really clearly with Catherine the Great in Russia, don't we?
Yeah.
Mid-1760s, she spends, 18 months grinding away on her nakaz document.
Yeah, getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning, developing serious headaches and eye strain to get it done. This wasn't some minor royal decree.
No.
It was huge, 655 clauses. A massive agenda for modernizing Russian law, defining the state structure. And she made this claim that equality meant all being subject to the same laws.
And crucially, she wanted it out there, accessible.
Right. She argued the new legal code needed to be printed and available at as small a price as an alphabet. Mass accessibility was key.
Wow. And she even suggested putting these government texts next to the scriptures in schools. That says a lot about how they viewed the power, the almost sacred legitimacy of the written word itself.
It really does. And you see a similar top-down move in Sweden, Gustav III, 1772. He uses a pretty bloodless military coup to push through his form of government.
And his justification?
Explicitly pointed to Sweden's disastrous involvement in the 7 Years' War, the crippling military and financial costs.
So war again. What was innovative about his text?
Well, he really experimented with this core idea of the written text as a fixed and sacred fundamental law, something that both limited and empowered the government.
That bedrock idea.
Exactly. And we often, maybe wrongly, credit that purely to the U.S. founders, right? But here's a monarch, years earlier, driven by wartime needs, establishing that very principle, the Constitution as the ultimate text.
Okay, so the text itself is becoming this kind of political weapon, this tool. But how did it spread so fast? How did it become this globally recognized thing beyond just royal courts or rebel camps?
One word, really, print. Written constitutions became a truly global political technology because they were just so easily copied, reproduced, and transported thanks to the printing press.
And the data on that is fascinating. The sources point out that between 1776 and 1850, if you look at constitutional texts, freedom of the press gets mentioned 560 times.
Okay.
That's more often than popular sovereignty, a core concept you'd think mentioned 477 times, or even freedom of speech only 196 times.
So they prioritized the distribution mechanism over some of the core philosophical ideas.
It looks like it. They knew the power was in getting the text out there.
And you see that strategy clearly with the U.S. Constitution in 1787. The delegates in Philadelphia, they were deeply worried about invasion. Britain, Spain, maybe even Russia down the line.
Right, external threats were front of mind.
Definitely. So they needed a text, a strong federal text that could secure the money and the military power for the new union.
And they made it distributable. The Declaration of Independence was super short, 1,300 words?
Yeah, about 1,337. And the Constitution itself is relatively brief, too, around 4,500 words.
Deliberately concise.
It seems so. Made them easy to print, fit on a single newspaper page, perfect for mass circulation, and crucially, for reading aloud to soldiers. Just like the Declaration had been read to Washington's troops. Practical application.
And this print strategy wasn't just for republics. You see it adapted elsewhere, right?
Oh, yeah. Look at Haiti. Toussaint Louverture leading the black-ruled state. He's defying Napoleon. What does he do? He deliberately prints his 1801 Constitution.
To publicize it.
Exactly. To announce to the world, basically, that all former slaves were now citizens, using the printed text as a political statement, accelerating Haiti's move towards independence.
But then the story takes another twist, showing the flexibility of this constitutional form.
Right. Because later you have Henry Christophe in Haiti. He was an uneducated artisan, rose up to become a general. And what does he do? Proclaims himself a hereditary monarch.
A king.
A king. And he uses constitutional texts as part of his claim to legitimacy. It just proves the written form itself wasn't inherently Republican. It was a technology for state building, whatever form that state took.
And as these documents are spreading, London becomes this kind of global hub, right? A marketplace for constitutional ideas. You have South American revolutionaries like Simon Bolivar spending time there. Why London?
Well, it wasn't just about ideas. It was intensely practical. London had the advanced mechanized print industry you needed to churn out these texts quickly.
Okay.
It had the financial markets to secure the loans needed to fund the wars of independence.
Money and communication.
And the global communication networks. It was a logistical center for waging war and launching new states onto the world stage.
And Bolivar, his time there, clearly influenced him. He told his delegates back home to study the British Constitution, looking for its Republican features.
Yeah, but he wasn't looking to copy it wholesale. He was actually searching for a model with a much stronger executive, maybe even a lifelong presidency.
Why?
To handle the sheer chaos and instability of post-revolutionary South America, he needed unity and strength,
Oh.
above all.
That tension, again, liberty versus the need for military power and stability.
It's woven through almost all these early constitutional efforts.
Which brings us to something darker, a paradox we really need to address. While these constitutions were defining citizenship, sometimes creating new rights, they also very often cemented the exclusion of huge groups of people.
Absolutely. Particularly women and very often non-white men.
How did that exclusion get so baked into this constitutional project that was supposedly about establishing polities?
It often came back to that military link we talked about.
Yeah.
Because these documents were so often born out of the need to mobilize for war, the idea of full citizenship got tied very tightly to military service.
If you fight, you belong.
That was often the implicit or sometimes explicit bargain. You see it in the language. After the 1790s, U.S. state constitutions frequently started using phrases like every free white male person when defining who could vote.
Stark language.
Very. And look at Peru's 1828 constitution. It explicitly lists eligibility for citizenship primarily based on military contribution. If you weren't in the military, your claim to full citizenship was weaker.
So, against that backdrop, the Pitcairn Island case from 1838 is just wild.
It's such a striking reversal, isn't it? Captain Russell Elliott drafts a constitution for this tiny remote island populated by a non-white mixed heritage community.
And the key difference.
It was too small and isolated for any kind of standard militia or army. That whole military necessity argument just didn't apply.
So Eliot felt free to do what?
Include women in the voting citizenry, because the usual military justification for excluding them wasn't relevant.
And the power of having it written down?
That proved crucial. Years later, when the Pitcairn Islanders moved to Norfolk Island, the women used that original written constitution, drafted by a state agent, to successfully defend their right to vote when local officials tried to take it away.
The text itself was the evidence, the authority.
Exactly. The simple fact it was on paper, recognized, mattered immensely.
This global spread, this recognition of the Constitution as a necessary tool, eventually forced non-Western states to adopt it too, right? Often as a defensive measure.
Definitely. Look at Japan's Meiji Constitution in 1889. Hugely important. It was the first real composite text in East Asia, blending a sovereign emperor with a modern bicameral legislature.
And the goal was pretty clear.
Oh yeah, it was explicitly designed to enable rapid modernization, build strength, and resist Western imperialism. Survival again.
And did it work, in terms of perception at least?
The world certainly noticed. Japan's military victory over Russia in 1905 was a massive geopolitical shockwave.
A non-Western power defeating a major European empire.
Precisely. And other non-Western states, the Ottoman Empire, Egypt, others, they looked at that and saw it as proof. Proof that constitutional reform, adopting this Western political technology, was absolutely vital for modern state effectiveness, for survival in the modern world.
So the Constitutional Project went from niche experiment to global requirement.
It became table stakes for political and military survival on the world stage.
So wrapping this up, we've traced this really incredible transformation. Written constitutions, they shift from being these rare, maybe philosophical documents to a global political necessity.
Driven fundamentally by the logistics, the sheer cost, and the terror, frankly, of modern hybrid warfare.
There are often documents born out of immense stress, trauma even, resisting foreign aggression, like Tunisia's Qanun or Japan's Constitution, or trying to rebuild after massive internal conflict, like the U.S. Civil War amendments, not necessarily documents of calm deliberation.
Right. But what's fascinating and perhaps enduring is the power of the written text itself, even when regimes ignore or violate it. Thomas Jefferson saw this way back in 1802.
What did he say?
He argued that though written constitutions may be violated in moments of passion or delusion, yet they furnish a text to which those who are watchful may again rally and recall the people.
A rallying point. That fixed text you can always return to.
Exactly. And that function seems incredibly relevant even today. You see echoes of it, maybe, in acts of protest like Olga Misik in Moscow reading the Russian Constitution aloud to police officers.
Using a state's own foundational text as a form of resistance, holding it up as the standard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's fixed, it's printed, it exists outside the whims of current leaders. It's this shared document people can point to and say, This is what we agreed upon.
So we hope this deep dive encourages you, wherever you are, to maybe look again at your own foundational documents. What texts do you rely on?
And what unexpected forces, what military anxieties or specific pressures might have actually brought that document into being in the first place.
It's worth looking past the inspiring preamble sometimes and into that historical pressure cooker.